one. Eddie Garcia is joining us on the podcast today. He's on Twitter at Eddie on Fox. This is Blindside Sports, episode 22. And this is a pretty busy week for me, I must say. Yesterday, dropped the NFL Week 18 reaction and, talking about all the coaches getting fired. Today, obviously, we have the interview with Eddie. And then tomorrow, we are going to be talking about the NFL playoffs. Without further ado, let me welcome in another guy who has at least 15 nicknames, not as much as 45 like our guy Ben Maller. But Eddie Garcia, what's up, man? How are you doing? Thanks for coming on.
I'm doing great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing good. And if you guys don't know who Eddie Garcia is, he is the weekday overnight Fox Sports Radio update anchor. He also hosts a very good hockey podcast called the Puck Podcast. And I'm not, I don't know much about hockey, and sometimes I'll tune into Eddie and I'll get caught up on the news, and he does a good job. So we're going to dive into, Eddie's story. And if you guys don't know, Eddie's a Steelers fan. So first, I want to ask you, you've been at the network 20 years along with Ben Maller. When was your first run-in with Ben Maller?
I mean, I can't remember like this first specific time, but back in the day, Ben was also an update anchor. And so, I would either come on after his shift, or he would come on after my shift, depending on what hours I was working. Because when I started, I was working like every shift, filling in, for people who took day off or people who were sick or whatever. So that's how I first got to know Ben. And then I think he was probably doing some weekend shows as well. So he had a couple of different things he was doing. So, but yeah, he was doing updates like me. And back in the day, we didn't have an editing staff, so we had to do all the editing of all the sound bites and everything too.
Wow.
So, and then we're trying to watch games, and we're editing sound, and then we're doing updates. And so they were very busy shifts that went really fast, but it was fun.
Yeah, that sounds like the grind. And when you got to work with Ben Maller the first time, was there, obviously this is an overnight show and there's some crazy stuff that goes on. Did you get introduced to the overnights very quickly with a crazy caller that, calls into Ben, like a Blind Scott, like a Genie in Medford, like a beer drinking Brian nowadays? And did it happen to you on like your first shift?
It was pretty obvious early on when I was, on the overnights regularly, that it's a different shift than any of the other shifts. I mean, but when I first started out, though, like I said, I was filling in I was literally doing every shift on the network. I would do something during the week in the drive time, something on the weekend overnight, something during the week in the early morning. I was like everywhere. So it was a good learning experience. It was a good learning experience to work all the different shifts, and I got to work with a lot of different people. So that was cool. But when I finally, got kind of in a set time slot, and then got to hear some of Ben's callers as opposed to some of the other shows callers. And by the way, not all shows take calls.
Yeah, you're right. The only
shows,
two that are left are you and Rob Parker on the weekdays, and I think Covino and Rich do it on the weekends. But a lot of radios now just filled with a bunch of guests, as Ben Maller says, and just crammed with guests and their takes. So Ben's one of the ones left who actually take the calls.
Well, I think it's really smart, though, on his part as well, because he understands that the callers to overnight radio are very unique. And if you listen to the show, and they're as big a part of the show as any of us. They're, sleeping callers, snoring callers, drunk callers, and then just, kind of the different people that are up late at night. So it certainly adds to the show. Even the bad callers, like, Sir Scratch Off or
that guy, the biggest suck up of all time.
I'm totally blanking on in Ottawa.
Gordon Tacoma.
Gordy in Ottawa.
Why did I say Gordon Tacoma on Oregon? Yeah.
Yeah, though even the bad callers are in their own way entertaining. And then you've got Blair and Marcel, and they're entertaining in their own special way. Emphasis on
Blair
special,
just says a bunch of out of pocket stuff on the radio, so it has to be entertaining.
So it's maybe I could understand if you were hosting in the afternoon and you didn't want to have callers, because a lot of times, the callers aren't that entertaining. You know what I mean? If it's just kind of the generic, I want to talk about the Cowboys or whatever, that's
Yeah.
not very interesting. But when you can have really unusual people calling in, it definitely adds to the show. So he's smart, I think, to take calls, and he knows what he's doing.
Speaking of knowing what they're doing, and I know you and your partner Doug over on the Puck podcast got started like 2007. Where'd you guys get the idea, and how did you guys grow your brand to be, one of the better hockey podcasts out there?
Well, I don't know that we've done a great job growing our brand, to be totally honest with you, but I think because we've been around so long that we're probably kind of in the consciousness of a lot of people out there who are involved in hockey. We started, I'm a huge hockey fan, and I understand even in my job that hockey is not going to be talked about a lot.
Yeah.
If there's a guy having sex with a woman at a hockey game, which happened
Kodak
the other
Black.
day, allegedly, some people don't think that happened, but I do. But anyway, that's when hockey gets talked about, when it's something bizarre or controversial or something. And it's frustrating because I love the sport. I think it's an awesome sport. I think it's way more interesting than basketball, for example, or baseball, but that's me. But anyway, and so many people that work in the business tell me hockey playoffs are one of the greatest things in all of sports, and yet they won't talk about it because they don't feel like it gets ratings. And my whole thing has always been, well, if you talked about it more, people would start to learn it more and would be more interested in it. But it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing. But anyway, my buddy Doug and I, who's also a hockey fan, we're just really frustrated with the lack of hockey coverage. And there were a couple of things that happened. One, the LA Times announced they weren't going to send any of their reporters to cover hockey for road games anymore, in like a cost-cutting move. And then I read an article in a local paper up in the Valley, about two guys. Like, one was a lawyer and the other guy was like, I don't know, a teacher. And they were doing a baseball podcast, and they had kind of gotten a little bit of notoriety. And I thought, well, hell, if these guys can do it, they got no broadcasting experience, we could do a hockey podcast and put it out there and see if anybody would listen to it, and kind of take matters into our own hands as far as covering the sport. So we just started doing a podcast. We put it out there. We didn't know who would listen. We certainly didn't know how long we would do it for. But as you said, like 16 years later, we've put out a show every week except 1 week. That week, my dad died and Doug was in Australia on vacation, so that we had circumstances. But every other week, we've done a show, and we've got listeners from all over the world, and we have our own little niche, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, no days off, as Ben says, man. That's crazy how in 16 years of weekly podcasts, there's only been 1 week where obviously you haven't done an episode, and that's for, personal reasons and vacation. And even with you going on all these vacations, you still put out an episode. It's pretty crazy. And let's get to the callers of the Ben Maller Show, the characters, if you will. What is the one character that has done the most for the show, in your opinion? Because I gotta say, I think it's Tammy, because she's like Tammy for like kindness. And if we're talking entertainment, Blind Scott, Jeannie and Medford, those are the two that come to my mind. But like actual militia helping, Tammy for sure.
Well, yeah, if you're like, Tammy is a behind the scenes person. If people don't know, she's obviously got a big heart. She's been very generous in many different ways, with keeping track of some of the militia, tracking them down and like helping them out if they need help. It's been crazy. I don't know what she does for a living. She should be like a private investigator or something, because I don't know how she tracks down these people.
When I think you were off this night, because I think it was at a company holiday a couple weeks ago after New Year. Yeah. And you were off, and it was I think it was Ricky or the other guy and Chris, and Tammy called. I believe this was Tammy. I can probably go back and find it, but she said something about a hospital and working a lot. So maybe she works like as a nurse. I don't know or what, but that's just what I thought I heard that in the call, but I could be completely wrong.
Coop might know, and maybe I'll ask him just because I'm curious now, but he talks to her obviously off the air. Yeah. And so he knows probably a little bit more about her than the rest of us. But yeah, I mean, she's very much behind the scenes, does a lot of stuff for the show, and does little nice things for the crew occasionally as well. So she's more behind the scenes. As far as like someone who's on the air, That's a good question. Who's done the most? I mean, honestly, it's hard to say that Marcel hasn't given us the most
Oh yeah,
crazy stuff to talk about. And of course,
Pascal
depending
Siakam.
depending on your point of view, he's not really trying to do that, yet he does. And just the things he says, and how he, I mean, he actually is, for his circumstances. You know what I mean? He's very professional. I mean,
Oh yeah,
there's no
he's
there's
so
no
good at
doubt
it.
in my
Like
mind. There's no doubt in my mind that if he were born under certain circumstances, he would be like some news anchor somewhere
yeah,
on
it's
television,
crazy.
because he does have, he has his limitations, but he also, like, throwing it to, like, when he'll throw it to me to do an update, or coming up, and he'll do like a Geico read or something crazy like that. So I mean, Marcel's given us a lot of moments and a lot of fun drops and things like that. So he's got to be up there as well. Blind
Blair.
Scott's, Blind Scott's there. Blair is there. Genie back in the day was a legend, obviously.
Oh yeah, they
And
still
then
drops get
for
played.
people who go way back, Pete in Pittsburgh is kind of one of the all-time legends as well. He was one of the original guys. So there's a lot of different ones. They kind of come and go, as I was talking about with my wife, because she's listened to the show before, but they come and go. But there's always, it's weird how there's always somebody to take their place. Like Weed Man Hippie goes, and here comes beer drinking Brian. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then hopefully beer drinking Brian won't leave for other reasons. But if he for some reason doesn't show up anymore, someone else will come in and take his place. It's weird how it always works out that way.
Yeah, and it's weird too because real fraud, as I call him, last year had the whole roast, making fun of Ben and his late father situation, and we had that weird, as you say, we get these characters, they're not always the same, but the weirdest one that this is, I don't know if like Coop or Berto or someone in the back doing like some investigative work, would probably be Coop, but that Hayes from Minnesota guy, that was one of the, I like, you have to think that was fake, like, because his voice would be different, and like I think it was Chris the custodian on Twitter, somebody looked up the profession that he claimed he was in, and there wasn't much about it, and like the one thing he found, the pay was different than what he said, but then again, it's completely different areas. I mean, I think that guy on Twitter is from like your guys' area, like SoCal, but it's just the Malware Militia callers and the Malware Militia in general are probably one of the most loyal groups. Like, you see Ben is off, that's a 2-week vacation of listening to the show for some of these people, because they don't like Brian, Bernie, whoever's in, and like, we need Ben, we're gonna die without Ben. It's super loyal. And what is the biggest case of the militia? Having the crew's back or Ben's back. It could be about anything serious, it could be an argument or a joke or whatever.
I don't know. I mean,
I'm gonna go
I think,
first.
okay.
This isn't probably the biggest one, but this comes to my mind. Do you remember around the Super Bowl when that Chiefs coach got arrested for driving drunk, injuring those 2 kids? Is a horrible thing. And Michael Silver on Twitter,
yeah,
Roberto, commented saying he has no sympathy. And I think there's at least like 15 guys from the militia just going in on Silver. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. That's when I realized they were so loyal.
Yeah, as far as that goes, that there's definitely no doubt it's the William Shatner thing. That's the biggest, the spats with chats, as Ben called it. So yeah, I mean, William Shatner,
every Fox employee blocked at that point.
Yeah, he blocked me, and I never even commented once on any of it. But yeah, there were. I mean, William Shatner probably blocked like 30 Malware Militia people at least,
went on
maybe
a blocking
more.
Spree.
And people were taking screenshots of their phones of him blocking them and posting them on Twitter and stuff. So yeah, that's definitely the biggest one where, and I guess I'm sort of responsible for that, because although I did what Ben wanted me to do, but he brought up what happened, the controversy where Fred Dreyer, the former NFL player who's been a guest on Ben's show a couple times, friend of the show, I guess, he's friendly with Shatner because they're both actors. And so Ben was included in a tweet, and so he tried to use that opportunity to talk to William Shatner or get in on him, and then Shatner slapped him down, and then so Ben was like, I didn't even really do anything. And so then I said, my quote was "release the hounds," which was release the Maller militia on
They're like a bunch of dogs just
right,
running at
and
one
attack
person.
him. And they did. So that's the biggest one.
Yeah, that's definitely. I kind of forgot about that. I was kind of thinking more recently, and the William Shatner stuff still gets brought up, to this day. Like Rob Guerra tweeted out like a month ago when I think it was something with Shatner. I don't remember what it was exactly. And he's like, I'm still blocked. And it's just, like I said, the loyalty of the militia. Ben has a podcast named after him. He has songs named after him. He has chicken fingers at a restaurant named after him, which is awesome. I mean, your own food dish, the Maller chicken fingers, like it's just cool. Like the way that Ben works, and his show's just different. Like you don't have, a lot of these hosts, like Jonas on the overnights, which he doesn't do anymore, which kind of sucks, but he still does, like when he'd be on the overnights, he'd do the game shows. And him and Ben are really the only two people I can think of who do those game shows. Like obviously Jonas had Guess That Garbage and Pro Wrestler, Porn Star. Ben has a lot more, like the Cite the Bite, the Maller's Mountain of Money, Password, Word Game of the Stars. What's the one on Friday? Hour 4.
There's Cite the Bite. I don't know if you said that one or not. Fact or Fiction.
Yeah, Fact or Fiction's good.
That was last night, I think. Fact or
Factor
Fiction,
or no. Yeah, I think it's
yeah, it's not Password.
The Andrew guy likes to call in.
It's crap. I can't believe I don't remember it, but it's like Password kind of, but it's more
with
sports related. Yeah.
Isn't it called? Yeah, I don't know. But Ben is like a lot of the game shows.
Balderdash, right? Balderdash.
Yes, Balderdash. Good job, Eddie.
Used to be Jeopardy, but we had to change it.
Yeah, but we don't want Ben Maller to get sued.
By the way, I just checked on my computer. I am no longer blocked by William Shatner.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Breaking news. I'm gonna send this to Coop right after the show. I'm gonna tell him right now. Tweet this out.
That's
Coop,
right.
Wrong Button Bob, somebody on the Fox Sports Radio account.
Breaking news. Yep.
That's crazy. Like right as we're talking about that, I'm gonna have to tweet about that during this.
I hadn't checked in a long time, so I decided let me check and see, and sure enough, I'm not blocked anymore. There you go.
There you go. That's crazy. And what is the funniest or craziest or most interesting thing that has happened on the air, such as the bat situation a couple months ago where Ricky had to, speaking of unleashing the hound, he had to unleash the bat.
That's one of the crazier ones for sure, because I remember before that happened, there was a sign on the main studio door that said something like "Do not enter" or something, and I was like, "What's going on in there?" And they said somebody saw a bat in there, and I kind of didn't believe it, to be honest with you, because how is a bat going to get in there? And so then there were like a week later, somebody said the bat came back, and I'm still like, this doesn't make any sense. And then of course, finally I see the bat flying around. I'm taking video of the thing flying around the hallway. So I'm like, well, I'll be damned. The bat was real. The legend was actually real. So that certainly was one of the more crazy things that has happened. There's been some really crazy things that have happened since I've been there that didn't happen on Ben's show as well, that I don't know if I can get into or not. But there have been, the craziest thing, I can't really get into specifics, but the craziest thing ever was we hired an overnight guy many years ago, and he lasted one day, and they fired him after one show. And because he had, I can't even say why, but he had done something so shocking. And my whole thing was, I'm sorry to like tease and not pay it off, but my whole thing was not that he did it, but that he did it on his first day on the job. Because you think about when you take a new job, you're on your best behavior. Like you want to make a good impression. This is my first day at this job, no matter what job it is. And for him to do something so horrifying that they had to immediately fire him was by far the craziest thing that has happened that I've been working there. One other thing I can share, there was a fist fight one time between one of our on-air staff and a producer.
It was
it, long,
it was
it,
Bursch. No, I'm playing.
no, it was a well, I don't know if I should say this or not, but anyway, uh, there was a story involving a sports legend and his wife, and it so happened that this wife was the sister of one of our hosts at the time, and
Ooh.
he had told the producer, I don't want to talk about this on the air because this is like it involves my family, even though it was kind of a sports story, like a controversial thing. And so for some reason, the producer decided to bring it up on the air, even though he had specifically told him, I don't want to talk about it. And I was doing the updates and I could hear in his voice how angry he was. And I'm like, oh man, this is not good. So then they go to break and the on-air guy comes into the other studio to confront the producer, and they have words, and he ends up punching the producer in the face.
No way.
And
Really?
Jake Warner, do you remember Jake Warner?
Oh, Jake, I gotta get him on here. That guy is a legend.
Yeah.
Big brother
Stay
Jake.
Awake with Big Brother Jake was the board op, and he separated him. And then they went back to try and continue to do the show. And the other host came into the update studio because I'm just watching this like I'm watching TV. And he's like, hey man, let's keep this between us, okay? We don't need to talk about this. And I'm like, yeah, it's cool, no problem. And I didn't say anything. I'm good at keeping secrets. I mean, I said it now, but so anyway, long story short, the co-host got fired, and it was the greatest firing in the history of his life because he immediately went to do TV, and he's now like a minor TV star here in Los Angeles.
What happened to the producer? Can you say that, or is the producer?
No, he was still there. He didn't get fired because he didn't throw a punch. He may have gotten reprimanded, but he's also gone on to be like kind of a big guy in radio elsewhere. But that was another crazy night.
Yeah, so I know you've touched on this before, but apparently, according to your wife, I heard this when your interview a long time ago. Apparently, she called in the Ben show, and you don't recall that. Is that really what happened? And then you guys met at some party?
Close. It wasn't Ben. It was a guy named Bruce Jacobs who used to do weekends, and I was on his show, and he used to include me a lot, like Ben does. And she was a big fan of that show. And so, yeah, she called in occasionally, and I don't really remember, to be honest with you. I kind of remember, when it's rare that women call in, right? We know, like, if you think about Ben's show, you can name all of them, right? There's
Tammy, Rachel, Regina.
Rachel, Regina, right. The sports sorceress. That's about it.
Yeah,
Every once in a while, one other. But so I'm sure I remembered a girl or woman calling into the show, but I didn't specifically remember her name. But so there another former update anchor, Karen Kay, was friends with my wife Karen because they're both huge Charger fans, and they're both named Karen, and so they connected on social media. Karen Kay had a birthday party, and she invited all the people from Fox Sports Radio, and she invited Karen, my at the time. Well, my wife now was invited anyway.
Yeah, we got you.
And so she reached out to me on social media because she loved Bruce Jacobs and me doing on the radio. And she said, hey, I'm going to be at this birthday party, and, it'd be cool if I could say hi. And I'm like, yeah, of course. So, I met her at the party, and it was obviously, we had a nice time. And then it was like, hey, you want to hang out, sometime? Because it was, she was a single woman, and she liked sports, and I was like, maybe she'd be fun to hang out with. And then, of course, things grew from there, and
the rest is history.
Married. That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool story, and it's kind of cool how you guys can bond over sports. I mean, I'm sure some people are like annoyed when their husband's watching football from 10 a.m. in the morning to like 8:30 at night on a Sunday, and even the college football fans too, even longer on Saturdays. It's just wild. What is the thing that gets under Ben's skin the most that you just love to do that just irritates him? Your favorite trolling mechanism for Ben?
Probably when the Clippers blow it in the playoffs.
You got him.
That's
got to
be my favorite. Yeah, it's got to be my favorite thing. And it was funny when Brian was it Brian or it was Bernie? Bernie was hosting recently, and somebody called
Stafford
in
stuff too. Bernie was going in.
Yeah, but somebody had called in and said something about, we want Ben to be happy, and Roberto and Coop and I are all like, no, we don't. And that may sound like we're all jerks, but if Ben wasn't so obnoxious about his teams, and I know part of it is his shtick. It's not,
and his troll, and it gets under Coop's skin. You could like Coop. He's like,
well,
Ben, the
yes.
Lakers. Like you could tell. So I mean,
Yes.
it's a trolling thing for Ben for sure.
It does. Yes, the Laker Clipper thing is real. But yeah,
it's like Rob Parker and Tom Brady.
And like I tell Ben, angry Ben and grumpy Ben and sad Ben is good for the show. He likes to disagree with that, but we all know it's true.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
Everybody loves it when the Clippers lose, and if the Rams lose this week, we're all going to have fun with that as well. So
they blow it to the Cardinals, man. Yeah. All this smoke. If Roberto's in that night, he better get the tape of Ben just going in on the Matthew Stafford trade, because I'll admit it, if this happens, I was kind of wrong about it. But anyways.
So we like to give Ben a hard time, especially the Clippers, but not so much the Dodgers, because Roberto's a big Dodger fan, but the Clippers are probably the number one team because, you don't live in LA, but you have to understand, honestly, the Clippers are completely irrelevant in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Now they're better than they were, because at one point they were like, no one cared. I mean, no one. They do have some fans now, but like compared to the Lakers or the Dodgers or anything else, it's like way down
Angels.
there. It's way down there. So for him to kind of, people, the way he talks about them, people might think that they're actually a big deal in town. They are really not at all. They're just not. But it's it kind of we roll our eyes and shake our head anytime he kind of pumps up the Clippers, because even them being good with Kawhi and Paul George and having some good players and having some good seasons, they're still not anywhere close to being as popular as the Lakers, even if the Lakers suck. So that's just it's kind of comical. But anyway.
Yeah, that is true. And I remember the most delusional monologue he's had in a while about the Clippers, and there's been some pretty bad ones. Was at the NBA trade deadline last year when they picked up Rajon Rondo, and he was just so excited, and he was making it look like the Lakers just picked up like Steph Curry or something. He's like, this is such a good trade. And longtime listeners of Ben, I don't know if you or anyone in the crew have pointed this out, but you can tell when it's a delusional take. Yeah. Ben doesn't really believe it. Just the way he talks. He talks like this. Kind of like it's just the tone of his voice.
I even think the Matthew Stafford thing, a lot of it is, I don't think he really likes Matthew Stafford. I think he truly does believe that he's better than Jared Goff.
I mean, we all do.
But
besides Bernie.
Well, besides Bernie, I think, and maybe Rob Parker. But I think that deep down, he's not a big fan of Matthew Stafford. And he probably deep down in his heart thinks he's going to blow it in the playoffs. I don't think if you gave him truth serum that he really believes Matthew Stafford will lead them to a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But he's going to act like he does. Yeah, probably.
Well, of course, that's his favorite team. But yeah, it obviously Ben in his teams. And I remember Coop saying this a couple months ago, is really the only team that his takes make sense for are the Dodgers.
It's probably weird. Yeah, well, they're really good, so it's easy to have, it's easy to pump up the Dodgers when they're, winning World Series or playing for World Series. So it's, I get that, but that's probably accurate. I would say that's probably true.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you one more question about the radio, and I want to ask you about your Steelers for the playoffs and then the future. Joan, when you heard, you've been, working with Jonas Knox for a very long time. When you saw him get that, full-time promotion, what was it like for you as you and Jonas? I mean, you guys were both update anchors, and we all know Jonas's story, working from the bottom, literally, Chuck E. Cheese rat, and now he's a morning drive, as Ben Maller would say.
Yeah, I'm happy for him. He's earned it. He started, like you said, pretty much at the bottom. He's done anything that the company has asked him to do, and that pays off. That kind of dedication and commitment pays off. I'm not saying you don't have to have talent also, But it is, it's good to know that if you just work your ass off and say yes, basically to anything that your bosses want you to do, that eventually you get rewarded for that. So he was a producer for a long time. He did some update anchoring. I think he probably did some editing too, which is kind of at the very bottom as far as paid jobs at the network. And he's just stuck with it. And, he got his foot in the door doing hosting on the weeknights, got that relationship with Brady Quinn, and that helped kind of parlay them into filling in after Clay Travis left. They add LeVar Arrington, and now suddenly they've got a morning show, and I think it's a pretty good show.
Oh yeah, definitely entertaining, and it's unique too.
Yeah, it is. It's entertaining, and LeVar has definitely injected a lot of energy and fun into it. Brady's a super smart guy. I mean, look, LeVar just got inducted in the College Football Hall of Fame.
Congrats,
I think
LeVar.
I think Brady's going to get in at some point. You can't be a 4-year starter at Notre Dame, finish in the top 3 in the Heisman voting your senior year. He'll get in. So you will have 2 College Football Hall of Famers and 2 number 1 draft picks in the NFL. Talking football. It's a pretty good resume for those guys, and it's been a fun show. And Jonas is obviously kind of the traffic cop a little bit, and also kind of the instigator as well, because he is a character. If you only knew behind the scenes some of the things he does and says, but no, I'm happy for him. He's earned it. He's worked really, really hard. And like I said, it's very cool to see that if you can start at the bottom, and if you work hard and do pretty much anything that the company asks you to do, you will get rewarded for it. And I'm glad he has.
Yeah, it's cool to see. And also, I mean, it sucks to see Danny G get, on the weekends again, but to see our guy Lee, he's been there forever. He's getting, he gets to go up with the big boys and work with the 2 pros and Jonas. And they were, Lee and Brady were, they had a little, I'd never seen Lee that energetic before until, 2 pros and a cup of Joe. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, well, let me tell you this. I'm impressed with your knowledge, because you clearly listen to all the shows and know what you're talking about. Good. No, that's cool. You're really into it. It's great.
Really, like someone, I think it was Mason, the millennial, or it might have been Roberto or Bo. Someone asked me, like, how do you listen to all these? I'm like, the only people I listen to like consistently is, obviously Ben, Jonas, Brady, LeVar, and the odd couple. Like, sometimes I'll tune to Gottlieb and the other guys, but like those are the 3 shows I keep up on. And then obviously all the weekend guys in the background as the football's happening. But yeah, I got to ask you about your Steelers. Hopefully this doesn't have a Ben Maller take on things, but what are your expectations, if any, for this Kansas City Chiefs Pittsburgh Steelers game?
I think it'll take a minor miracle for the Steelers to win.
Agreed.
They can't keep up offensively in any way with Kansas City. If their offense scores 21 points, that's a great day for the Steelers. For Kansas City, that's average, maybe even below average.
Yep.
So it's going to take, the Chiefs are going to have to help them. The Chiefs are going to have to turn it over a couple times. The Steelers are going to have to make some plays somewhere other than their offense, get a pick 6, punt return for a touchdown, fumble return. Maybe TJ Watt can, get a strip sack, something like that. But it's going to take a lot for them to pull off the upset. I know Ben Roethlisberger said, hey, no pressure on us. We're just going to go out there and let it all hang out. And I mean, that's fine to have that attitude. But of all the games, to me, that would be the most shocking if the Steelers beat the Chiefs. I just don't see it happening. They just don't have the offense to keep up with Kansas City in any way, shape, or form. So, like I said, if the Steelers pull off the shocking upset, it will be because Kansas City, as Ben says, and I don't agree with this, but I get why it's good talk radio. Ben says the reason why Ben says the better stories in the losing locker room is because it's more entertaining to blame people for losing than to credit people for winning. But if the Steelers win, Ben will do this, and deservedly so, completely trash the Chiefs. Because, like I said,
if they lose to the Steelers, they're going to be the most talked about thing.
Yeah, they will have to completely crap the bed to lose to the Steelers. I love the Steelers. I'll be cheering like crazy for them, but I just don't see any way that's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. And like you kind of nailed it perfectly. Like really the only bright spot on that offense is Najee Harris and, Deontay Johnson sometimes make plays. Claypool is kind of nothing at this point. He had a couple touchdowns this year, a couple plays, and I don't know if you saw this, but the TikTok dancer himself, Juju's off IR. But like you said, it's that
Yep.
offense, and you have these receivers, but obviously Big Ben's aged. He's not the Big Ben Roethlisberger he was even 3-4 years ago. Like he played like trash against the Browns, and they still won. That's because how messed up and injured and crippled the Browns are. I mean, it definitely a bad situation. And one more Steelers question for you. What, like, obviously Big Ben's out after this year, seeming like that's going to happen. Who do you think is going to be under center week 1 next season for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
It's a great question. I don't really know, to be honest with you. I don't have a good feel
Who would you
for
want?
it.
Like a
That's
rookie?
that's a
Would
great
you like
question.
to sign
Well,
someone in
I
free
mean,
agency, trade?
The Pickett kid out of Pitt, who's obviously
Yep.
right there in Pittsburgh. A lot of people would love to see him be drafted by the Steelers. I would love to see that as well. I don't know. It's a weak quarterback draft class this year. So what does
Yep,
that
I agreed.
mean? Does it mean that no one's going to take a quarterback high up in the first round, or are they going to be desperate because there's so few potential impact quarterbacks that these guys might actually get drafted a lot higher than they normally would because there's just not many to choose from. And quarterback's so important, and they're willing to take a chance on, winning the lottery and getting another Justin Herbert, So the Steelers, all I can say is this: the Steelers very, very rarely ever make big splashes signing free agents. They rarely make big trades. The Mika Fitzpatrick trade was like really out of character for them.
Oh, yeah.
But this is an interesting situation where I think they kind of feel like if they could get an impact quarterback, that they could be right back in the playoff mix again next year. So and then another kind of interesting little twist on it is their GM Kevin Colbert. He's going to retire after the draft, and he's been their GM and running their front office for decades. And how that transition is going to take place is going to be really interesting. Who's going to replace him? I assume they'll promote from within the organization. That's what they usually do. But that's a huge loss for the Steelers. It's going to be a gigantic hire for the Rooney family to be able to replace him with someone who can take the baton from him and keep going forward. Because this guy has put together an amazing staff as far as scouting and drafting. The Steelers always draft very well. I mean, look at last year. They get Najee Harris, who's the best young running back in the NFL as far as rookies this year, and then they get Pat Freiermuth out of Penn State, who
That guy's a
who I didn't know much about at all, and he's been fantastic. So both those guys should only get a lot better going forward. So anyway, there's a lot of things going on with the Steelers. The one thing I'm really curious is, would they give Dwayne Haskins a chance to show if he could be the guy that was drafted number 1 by Washington? Was it one of those situations where he was really immature and it wasn't a good fit, and he was kind of thrown into something that he wasn't ready for? Maybe he's ready now after sitting out a year and kind of learning to get a chance. I'm curious to see, but they see him every day, so they know. It's kind of the Mike Zimmer quote. Mike Zimmer was asked about playing Kellen Mond or something like that in the last game of the regular season. And they're like, would you like to get a look at him? And he said, no. And they said, why? And he's like, because I see him every day. So maybe that's the case with the Steelers. Maybe they see, Dwayne Haskins in practice and on the practice squad, and they know whether this guy is deserving of a chance or not, but they're not telling us that. I don't know. But that would be interesting to see if they think that they can't get a quarterback in the draft this year, if they would give him a chance to prove or not that he can play at the NFL level to see what he can do. And then if he can't, then the next year kind of go out and try and find the answer at quarterback.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too. It's like, give Haskins a shot. And, if you're bad, I mean, you get a better pick. And, look, who knows? I mean, about the quarterback class next year, it should be better. And we'll have to wait and see. I mean, another option is maybe the Niners are ready to, put Trey Lance in the mix and, do something with Jimmy G. Maybe they do that. I don't know how you'd feel about that. But pretty interesting stuff for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'll have that preview out tomorrow on the Wildcard podcast. This has been Blindside Sports. Eddie Garcia, man, I really appreciate your time. It was super fun. Great, knowledge about the Maller Militia.
My pleasure. Best of luck to you on your podcast, and keep putting in the good work. And I'm sure it'll be successful for you. And I'm glad I could help you out a little bit.
Thank you, man. Follow Eddie on Twitter, Eddie on Fox. Listen to the podcast out Wednesday mornings. Hear him every weeknight, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., doing your national updates and chopping it up with Ben. Get me on Twitter at EmmettNosi04. Follow the show at BlindsidePod11. All my socials will be in the description. Hope you have a good night. Thank you for watching.